Hey everyone, so today's video is going to be the short story wrap-up, aka I wrote a short story every month for a year. So at the beginning of 2021, I made a crazy goal to write a short story every single month of the year. And did I succeed? Let's find out. I started off the challenge extremely strong. I understood the assignment. So in January, I wrote 4 short stories. The first is a flash fiction piece called Shark Swimming, and this clocked in at about 900 words. So here's the logline. A young woman attends a shark swimming class after breaking up with her girlfriend. It's really short and is, I feel, the beginning of the super reflective fiction, which is a trend that you'll see throughout the rest of the year. So the next short story I wrote is called Joanne, I'll Pray for You, which is actually a rewrite of one of the very first short stories I wrote called NYC in Your Apartment. The rewrite clocked in at about 1,800 words. A college dropout who insists she's being haunted by a poltergeist unexpectedly breaks up with her boyfriend. So I then wrote a short story called How to Spell Alpaca, which clocked in at about 1,700 words, and the story is as follows. A mother must confront her strict parenting style when she meets a young mother and daughter at a petting zoo. I finished up January by writing a short story called The Party, which is probably the most personally rejected story I have ever submitted. This clocked in at about 2,400 words, and it is about a newly divorced mother who RSVPs to a bizarre party she was not invited to. So in February, I wrote a short story called Protect the Young, and this was for a workshop. This story was about 4,100 words, so pretty long for me. You'll see the rest of the year I did not write very long fiction. And here's the logline. A mother acknowledges her daughter's murderous tendencies after her backyard chickens mysteriously die. So for March, I wrote a short story called Where to Run When the Lamb Roars. This clocked in at about 2,100 words, and it is published on the Thames Review. It's free to read. You can find it online. I will link it in the description. A murderous brother and sister upkeep their yearly tradition of abducting a young girl. So in April, I wrote 2 short stories. They're actually microfiction. The first is called 5 Times Fast, and this is about 300 words. So a woman in a friends with benefits relationship visits Ricky, who works at a laundromat. The next story I wrote is called Carousel Pony, and this was about 240 words, and the logline is as follows. A child on an amusement park carousel yearns for a mother. So I actually wrote these as exercises for a class for short fiction that I took with Ming Chang. In May, I wrote a short story called What Leaves Her, which is about 1,100 words, a content warning for miscarriage. A teenager working a shift at an amusement park's carousel processes motherhood after an unexpected miscarriage. So in June, I wrote a flash fiction piece called Jeremy, and this was about 560 words. And the logline is as follows. A cake decorator who insists the name Jeremy is the most difficult to write on cakes ponders motherhood when a child named Jeremy comes in for a birthday cake. In July, I wrote a short story called The Window of a Stranger's House, which was about 2,200 words. A single middle-aged woman craving touch finds inspiration in the couple that lives across her apartment. So this is actually the very first short story idea and short story title that I ever got, The Window of a Stranger's House. I actually got this idea when I think was in grade 11 or something. It must have been 2018 when I got this idea, and I had never written short fiction before, and I had thought of this concept of this lady stalking her couple neighbors, and this is the title that came with it, and I thought it was cool, but I didn't know how to write it because I'd never written short fiction, and also I think I was way too young to write this story, so it actually ended up working out for me that I waited quite a long time. I remember in July I didn't really have anything to write, but I felt like writing a story. I went through my old ideas and I decided to finally start with this one, and I'm very happy with how this story turned out. In August, I wrote a microfiction piece called Ninth Life. This was about 400 words. The logline is, a woman buries her shared pet cat and is relieved. So this is actually kind of a BS story that I wrote. August was the one month, besides April, where I was really panicking about this goal. I could not do any stories. I was moving in August essentially, and so it was way too hard. At one point, I think I was just sitting on the bathroom counter, typing this on my phone in my notes app. For a long time, I didn't know how long it was because it was just sitting on my notes app. So in September, I wrote a short story for my workshop called Eat Well, and this is about 1,500 words. So the logline is, a boyfriend and girlfriend in the last leg of their relationship are simultaneously connected and driven apart by her strange cooking. I really like this story. I think it's one of my favorite stories. It's a little weird, but cool, and I love the voice. I love the characters. I feel like I could write a little novel with them. Then in October, I wrote a short story for my short fiction class called called Listen to the Ocean. This is 1,800 words, and the logline is, a mother grieving the death of her son eats lunch at his favorite buffet with her newly pregnant sister. So this is the story where I started going downhill with this goal, and we'll talk about it in just a second. In November, I wrote Jasmine's Brows and Cuts, which was also for the short fiction class. It was for my final. This is about 2,100 words, and the logline is as follows. Jasmine, a newly 40-year-old woman, questions her ideology on beauty standards when a bold woman named Sada becomes the first client of her at-home salon. So Jasmine's Brows and Cuts is the first story that is distinctly like brown girl fiction. I don't often write about myself and my personal experiences. This is like my life right now, and I don't feel like I want right now to write about brownness or like being a woman of color. And that's just kind of my personal choice. And I feel like the tea is that we should let women of color write what they want, but I was feeling extremely homesick, and I decided to write a story set at home. Jasmine, the narrator, could be me in 20 years. And so it was nice. It felt like reconnecting with home, of course. In December, I have not written anything. It's the 21st. I've written 0 things because I've actually vowed to take a break. I will complete the goal. I am not going to not complete the goal. It will be done. Unfortunately, I have not drafted anything yet for December, so I don't know what I will be sharing with you, but keep an eye out for like a writing update, and I'll talk about what I wrote in December. So let's talk about the overall themes I noted in my year of short fiction. So the first theme I noted is relationships. So I wrote a lot of relationships. So a subtype of relationships I wrote were romantic relationships. So see short stories like Shark Swimming, which follows a woman who's just broken up with her girlfriend. And then Joanne, I'll Pray for You, which follows a woman who has just broken up with her boyfriend. The Window of a Stranger's House follows a woman who desires a romantic relationship, and Eat Well follows a romantic relationship that is failing. Another type of relationship that I wrote a lot about this year was mother-child. So in How to Spell Alpaca, the narrator meets a mother and her young daughter and is reminded of her own strained relationship with her daughter. In The Party, there is a mother-child relationship. Sort of that story is weird. I can't really describe it. Yeah, it's sort of in The Party too. In Protect the Young, a mother tries to explain away her daughter's murderous tendencies. Carousel Pony is in the perspective of a child who watches a mother and child on a carousel and sort of wants that for themselves. What Leaves Her, which is actually another carousel story, I just realized that, is about a teenager who tries to grapple motherhood. Listen to the Ocean follows a mother who has just lost her child, and then also the narrator's sister who is expecting a child. Jasmine's Brows and Cuts is a sort of different mother-daughter relationship because the daughter is an adult. The narrator grapples with her mother's judgment of her. So lots of mother-child relationships, some positive, some not so much. Another theme that I noticed was identity and aging. The Party, Protect the Young, The Window of a Stranger's House, Listen to the Ocean, Jasmine's Brows and Cuts. Most of them also dealt with an element of aging and sort of how the narrators grapple with that idea too. And another theme I noticed was domesticity. So most of my stories are steeped, I would say, in deep realism, where my previous fiction was more entrenched with being a little wacky or experimental in concept, like say The Species is Dead, which was published in Manola Review. That story is a little more high concept. I feel like my short fiction since then has toned down quite a bit. Where to Run When the Lamb Roars is like the most experimental like of the list that I mentioned, but it's toned down to the point where I write about a lot of mundane lives, and I really like it. I think there's something super interesting to be found, sparkly almost, to be found in very mundane things. Not that I don't like the other kind of short fiction that I used to write, but it isn't what I wrote this year, which is not what I was expecting. And what did I learn this year? I learned a lot. First, I love short fiction. So anything less than 3,000 words, but even better, anything less than 2,500 words. I used to be a person who'd be like, do not give me a 3,000 word count. I cannot write a 3,000 word story. I need like 4,500 words at minimum. This year, I really wrote a lot of short stories, which is super weird because I didn't think that I knew how to do that. And now that I know how to do that, I don't know how to write long short stories. So 2022 is probably going to be the year of trying to write longer stories. Though I will say I have written a lot of stories that are very like submittable in length. So I'm not mad about it. I figured out the structure, and I'd love to share that with you, sort of what I learned about short fiction structure this year, because it was so interesting. I also learned that I'm not as into super quirky or offbeat concepts as much, like I mentioned a second ago. I don't know. Those are not the stories that I'm writing right now. I'm not really writing about, I know 2020 was like the year of like a lot of death and murder. I don't really write as much about like that kind of stuff anymore. It's more like very boring, like I'm sitting down and recalling this moment in my life fiction. You know, I really enjoyed it this year. It was a lot of fun. A story collection that really changed my view of short fiction was How to Pronounce Knife by Suvankam Tamavangsa. That short story collection follows mostly pretty like everyday people in everyday situations, but it showed just how fascinating character psychology can be, because character psychology can push a whole story, can carry the entire thing essentially. And so I decided to experiment more with that rather than the concept. So who knows? We'll see where I am next year. The next thing I learned was that my writing has humor, which was so weird. I was very surprised about that. In workshop, I have been told that my writing is funny. Is the autistic person that I am, I don't notice that I'm being funny. So, okay. I was very happy to learn this. I'll take it. I like funny things. The final thing that I learned this year was that my first drafts are often awesome. It's not that all of my first drafts forever for the rest of my life are going to be great, but I definitely noticed this year that I was very happy with a lot of first drafts, and most of the time I did not make structural edits to my short stories, probably because they're very short, but anyway, I didn't make any structural edits. It was mostly just line edits. The biggest story that I have to revise this year is probably How to Spell Alpaca. I just have to add a couple paragraphs, but that's like the extent of my revisions. So I was really happy with that this year. I was excited. I was like, okay, I can draft something and it's not going to be awful. And then the question of the year is, would I do it again? I loved this. I don't want to understate that. I loved this challenge. I was not expecting it to get difficult toward the end because of how easy it was in the beginning. Like, not even in the beginning, but like for the first 6-7 months, it was a breeze. I had a lot of fun doing it. I felt great because I was writing a lot of short fiction, where before I was writing maybe like 2, 3, 4 short stories a year. I felt very in touch with short stories, and not only writing short stories, but in order to write short stories when I was like feeling a little uninspired, I would read a lot of short stories. So I read a lot of short fiction this year, and I really liked how much it kept me on top of my own short fiction. You know, writing is the thing for me that just happens. It's not really something I plan. You already know I'm a pantser. I don't like the planning stuff. But to be able to have like a goal in the back of my mind of like, oh, I want to actually put my mind to do this now, rather than like, we'll see what happens. That made me very excited because I got a lot out of it. I ended up getting tons of stories. I don't even know how many I wrote by the end of this month. 16 short stories in 1 year. Crazy. I mean, some of them are microfiction, but most of them aren't. Most of them are full-fledged short fiction. The difficult thing came when I had to do school with it. But I mean, to be fair, I was doing school for the first 4 months of this challenge. I was in my writing degree. I had a lot of energy in the beginning because I hadn't really written as much short fiction at that point. I think I'd maybe written like 6 short stories before then, maybe 5 short stories before then. So I was just very excited to experiment in this new form. I learned a lot, guys. Like I feel very comfortable in short fiction, at least short fiction that's like 2,500 words and below. I'm very comfortable in that word count now. And I really enjoyed it. I did get tired toward the end. In November, I got tired and I didn't know how I could continue this. And I was like, why? But I've never, ever regretted doing this challenge. I think when it came to starting 3rd year, it was difficult because I had 2 short stories that had to be really polished for my workshop. And then I had to write 2 short stories for a short fiction class that I was taking on top of that. So I found it kind of difficult to write that much short fiction in such like close succession. There wasn't as much short fiction for me to write when I was in the 2nd term of 2nd year. So this year I did have a lot, and not just to write, but to edit. So a lot of my time had to be going toward that. I feel weird not doing the challenge. I feel like, oh, this was my thing. Like I had a lot of fun doing it and I could do it for the rest of my life. That said, I don't think I'm going to consciously do it in 2022, just because I have a lot of short fiction that I have a collection for now that I just kind of want to like take it easy and see where that leads me. If it's feasible for you, I recommend the challenge, though it's difficult. Maybe a short story every other month might be a little more realistic. So all of these stories are going to contribute to my short story collection, She Is Also Dead, which I will make a video on soon because there are a lot of stories in it. It already had a whole bunch of stories from like 2019 and 2020 as well. It's coming along, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in another one. Bye.